under the dazzling lights of the wrestling ring, where the cheers of thousands echo through packed arenas, there exists a world far more complex than what the audience sees. It is a world of triumph and pain, of carefully crafted personas and personal sacrifices. And in the heart of this world, there was Debra, a woman who stepped into the spotlight with grace, glamour, and an unshakable presence. Her name became synonymous with strength and resilience, a figure both admired and scrutinized from the moment she entered the wrestling industry. Debra captivated fans with her charisma and undeniable charm. She played her role to perfection, becoming one of the most recognized women in the world of sports entertainment. But behind the glamour of championship belts, behind the bright red carpets and roaring crowds, there was another side, one rarely seen, rarely spoken of. This is a story of Debra, a story of ambition, love, betrayal, and the harsh realities of life inside the wrestling business. A story of highs that touched the sky and lows that nearly broke her spirit. Through the lens of her life, we uncover the price of fame in an industry where the fight continues long after the final bell rings, long before the bright lights of the wrestling world cast their glow upon her. Debra was just a young girl growing up in a world far removed from the chaos of the industry she would one day call home. Born into a modest family, her childhood was shaped by the values of hard work, determination, and resilience, qualities that would later define her career. From an early age, she stood out not just for her beauty, but for her intelligence and ambition. She excelled in school, showing an interest in performance and public speaking, traits that hinted at her future in the limelight. But life was not without its challenges. She grew up in a time and place where expectations for women were rigid, where dreams were often shaped by tradition rather than personal ambition. Yet, Debra was never one to follow the path laid out for her. She wanted something more. Her love for entertainment and sports developed through watching television. Drawn to the larger-than-life figures who commanded the screen, wrestling, in particular, fascinated her, not just for physicality, but for the spectacle, the storytelling, the ability to captivate an audience with nothing more than presence and charisma. It was a world that felt both distant and oddly familiar, a place where confidence and perseverance were the keys to survival. But before she ever set foot in the wrestling world, she followed a different path. She pursued education, took on various jobs, and explored different avenues of success. There were moments of doubt, times when she questioned where she was headed. Society had a way of pressuring women into conventional roles, urging them to settle down, to play it safe. But Debra was not built for an ordinary life. Her first taste of public attention came through beauty pageants, where she not only honed her stage presence, but learned how to navigate the world of show business. The pageant world was ruthless, filled with judgment, competition, and expectations of perfection. But it was here that she developed a thick skin, a trait that would prove invaluable in the wrestling industry. She learned how to stand tall, how to carry herself with confidence, and most importantly, how to use her image to her advantage. The transition from beauty queen to wrestling personality was far from immediate, but it was inevitable. Fate had a way of pulling her toward the business, slowly weaving her into the world of professional wrestling. She would enter the industry in a way few expected, and once she was in, there was no turning back. What began as curiosity soon turned into passion, and that passion would lead her into a world that was as thrilling as it was unforgiving. Debra's entrance into the world of professional wrestling was anything but conventional. Unlike many who fought their way through independent circuits or trained for years to master the craft, her journey began in an unexpected way, through her association with the business rather than direct involvement in the ring. At first, she was an outsider looking in, drawn to the spectacle, the energy, and the larger-than-life personas that ruled the industry. But it didn't take long for her to realize that she belonged in that world. With her striking presence and undeniable charisma, she quickly found herself stepping into the spotlight, ready to carve out her own legacy. Debra's ascent in the wrestling world was swift, propelled by a combination of beauty, confidence, and a keen understanding of the entertainment industry. She knew that in professional wrestling, image was everything. It wasn't just about athleticism, it was about presence, about commanding attention the moment you stepped through the curtain. And Debra had that ability in abundance. Her first major opportunity came when she aligned herself with some of the industry's biggest names. At a time when female figures in wrestling were often seen as mere accessories to male superstars, Debra managed to break through, making herself an integral part of the show rather than just a background character. Her role evolved from that of manager to a true on-screen personality, someone whose presence alone could shift the energy of an entire segment. The fans took notice. Whether they cheered or jeered, they reacted. And in professional wrestling, reaction was everything. She developed a persona that was both glamorous and cunning, a character that blended sophistication with a ruthless edge. Her signature look, elegant outfits, a confident strut, and an ever-present air of superiority made her one of the most recognizable women in the industry. But it wasn't just her looks that captivated audiences. It was her ability to play the game. Debra understood the business side of wrestling. She knew how to create intrigue, how to work a storyline, how to keep audiences invested in her every move. She wasn't just there to stand beside the stars. She became one. Her involvement in some of the era's biggest feuds and storylines cemented her place in wrestling history. Whether she was managing champions, engaging in high-profile rivalries, or finding herself at the center of dramatic backstage conflicts, Debra remained a talking point. She wasn't just a bystander in the male-dominated world of wrestling. She was an active participant, a woman who refused to be overshadowed. The industry, however, was as ruthless as it was rewarding. The higher she climbed, the more the pressure mounted. With fame came scrutiny. With success came expectations. But for now, Debra was at the top of her game, enjoying the kind of recognition she had once only dreamed of. Yet, as many before her had learned, the wrestling business had a dark side. And for Debra, the real challenges were only just beginning. At the height of her fame, Debra was a fixture in the wrestling world, a name that resonated with fans and industry insiders alike. But behind the glitz and glamour of televised appearances and high-profile storylines, she faced a reality far different from the scripted world she played a role in. The wrestling industry was not just about what happened inside the ring. It was a brutal environment where politics, personal struggles, and behind-the-scenes conflicts could make or break even the most successful careers. One of the greatest challenges Debra faced was the constant scrutiny that came with being a woman in a male-dominated industry. While she had built her persona on confidence and poise, the expectations placed upon her were relentless. She was judged not only for her work but for her appearance, her relationships, and even her personal choices. Wrestling audiences could be unforgiving, and the industry itself was notorious for its double standards. While male superstars were allowed to reinvent themselves and evolve, women were often seen as disposable, celebrated in their prime, but quickly cast aside when the next new face arrived. The pressure to maintain relevance was immense. Every decision she made, whether it was a storyline choice, a public appearance, or even the way she spoke in interviews, was dissected by fans, the media, and those within the business. Some critics dismissed her as just another valet, failing to acknowledge the charisma and effort that had made her a star. Others speculated about her personal life, fueling rumors that often overshadowed her actual contributions to the industry. Behind closed doors, the personal toll of the wrestling lifestyle became increasingly evident. The constant travel, the demanding schedule, and the need to always be on left little room for rest or personal stability. The wrestling business thrived on chaos, And for those involved, it was difficult to separate real life from the scripted drama they portrayed on screen. Relationships were tested, friendships were often fleeting, and betrayal was commonplace. For Debra, the lines between her professional and personal life began to blur in ways she hadn't anticipated. She found herself in relationships that were scrutinized just as much as her career, and with that scrutiny came an added layer of stress. The wrestling world had its own set of unspoken rules, and those who didn't play by them often found themselves at odds with the business itself. Then came the moments of real pain, moments that weren't part of any storyline, moments that no amount of scripted drama could prepare her for, personal struggles, betrayals, and the weight of being in an industry that often prioritized spectacle over well-being began to take their toll. The same business that had made her a star also had the power to strip her of everything she had worked for. As the years passed, the industry began to shift, and with those shifts came uncertainty. Debra had seen countless stars rise and fall, and she knew all too well how quickly the wrestling world could move on. The question that loomed over her was simple but daunting. What happens when the spotlight fades? Despite the struggles, she fought to maintain her place in the business. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to simply walk away. But with every passing day, the weight of her journey became heavier. The realities of the industry, the politics, the backstabbing, the pressure were inescapable. And as much as she loved the wrestling world, she began to realize that the price of staying might be greater than the cost of leaving. It was a realization that many before her had faced, and one that would ultimately lead to a turning point in her career and her life. At the height of her career, Debra was more than just a recognizable figure in the wrestling industry. She was an icon, whether she was standing at ringside, captivating audiences with her presence, or cutting a promo that kept fans engaged. She had solidified her place among the most memorable personalities in sports entertainment. Her influence wasn't just in the moments she created on screen, but in the way she helped redefine the role of women in professional wrestling. While many saw her as a manager or valet, she proved that women could be just as integral to storytelling and the industry's success as their male counterparts. She wasn't just a supporting act. She was a force in her own right, someone who commanded attention every time she stepped in front of the camera. One of the most defining aspects of Debra's career was her ability to navigate the ever-changing landscape of professional wrestling. The industry was unpredictable, with new stars emerging and storylines constantly evolving. Yet, she remained relevant, continuously adapting to whatever role was given to her. Whether she was managing top-tier talent, engaging in personal rivalries, or stepping into the ring herself, she brought an undeniable energy that kept audiences invested. Her partnerships with some of the biggest names in the industry only added to her legacy. She wasn't just a background character in their stories. She was often the catalyst for some of the most memorable moments, whether it was playing a key role in a dramatic betrayal, adding tension to a championship feud, or delivering promos that fans still remember today. Debra left an impact that extended far beyond her time in the business. But perhaps what made her legacy truly unique was the way she blended sophistication and controversy, elegance and intensity. She played a character who was confident, glamorous, and always in control. But behind the scenes, she was navigating a world that wasn't always easy for women. She fought for her place in an industry that often overlooked or underestimated women, proving that she was more than just a pretty face. She was a performer, a personality, and a star in her own right. Even as the wrestling industry evolved, with new faces taking center stage, Debra's influence remained. Fans still talked about her most iconic moments, still debated her best storylines, still remembered the impact she had on the industry. She had become a part of wrestling history, her name etched into the legacy of an era that defined a generation. But as every wrestler knows, the peak never lasts forever. The The business moves on. New stars rise. And the spotlight eventually shifts. For Debra, the next chapter of her story would be the most difficult yet. The part where she had to face the reality of leaving behind the world that had defined her for so long. The fall from the top is never easy. And for Debra, the final years in the industry would bring challenges that tested her in ways she had never imagined. As the wrestling industry evolved, so did its roster, storylines, and the faces that fans cheered for. The business that had once embraced Debra with open arms was now shifting, making room for a new generation of talent. The reality of professional wrestling was setting in. Longevity was a rare privilege, and for many, the journey often ended before they were ready to say goodbye. For years, Debra had been a mainstay in the industry, a name that commanded attention, and a personality that brought drama to the screen. But as time passed, her role in the business became uncertain. The same company that had once valued her presence began shifting its focus. Wrestling promotions were investing in newer stars, and the opportunities for seasoned veterans like Debra started to dwindle. The decline wasn't immediate, but it was noticeable. Her appearances became less frequent, her storylines less significant. The industry was moving in a direction that placed less emphasis on managers and valets. And for someone who had built her career on charisma and presence, that shift was particularly challenging. Outside of the ring, Debra was facing personal challenges that made this transition even more difficult. The wrestling lifestyle had taken its toll. Years of constant travel, emotional stress, and industry politics had left her drained. She had dedicated so much of her life to the business that the idea of walking away felt like losing a part of herself. But the wrestling world wasn't known for its kindness to those who were no longer in the spotlight. Debra soon found herself struggling with a reality that many before her had faced. What happens when the industry no longer has a place for you? Rumors and speculation about her future swirled. Some believed she would make a comeback. Others whispered about personal struggles behind the scenes. The media, always hungry for controversy, focused on the parts of her story that generated the most headlines rather than acknowledging the years of hard work she had put into her career. In her private moments, Debra reflected on everything she had been through, the triumphs, the setbacks, the friendships, and the betrayals. Wrestling had given her fame, financial success, and a place in history, but it had also demanded sacrifices that few outside the business could truly understand. Relationships had been strained. Personal happiness had often been placed on the back burner, and the highs of the industry had come with equally crushing lows. She had seen it happen before. Superstars who had once been adored by millions finding themselves forgotten, struggling to adapt to life outside the ring. The transition from being a star to just another former name in the industry was a painful one, but it was also inevitable. And so, Debra faced a difficult choice. She could continue fighting to remain relevant in a business that had already begun to move on, or she could step away on her own terms, choosing to write the next chapter of her life outside the world of wrestling. As she weighed her options, she realized something important. Her legacy was already secured. She had made her mark, created unforgettable moments, and built a career that fans still talked about, whether she was in the ring, at ringside, or simply a name from the past. She had left an impact that couldn't be erased. The final challenge wasn't about reclaiming the spotlight. It was about accepting that her time in the wrestling world had run its course and finding peace in the fact that she had given everything she had to the business. For the first time in years, Debra allowed herself to consider what life could be outside of wrestling. She had spent so long being a character, a persona crafted for the entertainment of millions, that she had almost forgotten who she was beneath it all. But now, she had a chance to rediscover herself, to step away from the chaos of the industry and focus on a life she had put on hold for so long. The decision to walk away wasn't easy, but it was necessary, and as she prepared for her next chapter, She did so knowing that while her time in the wrestling business had come to an end, the legacy she had built would remain. Because in wrestling, the greatest stars are never truly forgotten. As the curtain began to close on Debra's wrestling career, the reality of leaving the business she had dedicated so much of her life to became increasingly real. The cheers of the crowd, the bright lights, the energy of the arena, it had all been part of her identity for so long. But now, she stood at a crossroads, preparing to say goodbye to the industry that had shaped her, for better or worse. Her departure wasn't marked by a grand farewell match or an emotional retirement speech in the ring. Instead, it was a gradual fading out, the kind that happens to so many in the wrestling world. One day, you're in the headlines, the center of attention, the focal point of major storylines. The next, you're no longer a priority for the company. Your presence reduced to occasional appearances or nostalgic mentions. For Debra, stepping away wasn't just about walking out of a ring. It was about letting go of a part of herself. Wrestling had been her life, her passion, and her biggest stage. But as she prepared to move on, she reflected on what it had cost her. The business had given her fame, success, and opportunities she never imagined, but it had also taken pieces of her along the way, sacrifices in her personal life, relationships strained by the constant grind, and the emotional toll of always being in the public eye. Her final moments in the industry were bittersweet. There were no fireworks, no dramatic send-off, just a quiet understanding that her time had come. She made her final appearances with the same poise and confidence that had defined her career, knowing that this was the last time she would walk through those curtains. The roar of the crowd still echoed in her ears. But this time, she wasn't just playing a role. She was saying goodbye. In those final appearances, she saw the fans, the people who had supported her through the highs and lows. Some had cheered for her, others had booed, but all had been part of the journey. Wrestling was unique in that way. The connection between performer and audience was unlike anything else. And as she stepped out of the spotlight, she knew that, in some way, she would always be a part of that world. Behind the scenes, she shared quiet moments with those who'd been by her side throughout her career, fellow wrestlers, friends, and mentors, some who had been there from the very beginning, others who had joined her along the way. They understood what it meant to leave, to transition from being a larger-than-life figure to just another name in the history books. Some encouraged her, others offered words of wisdom, and a few simply sat with her in silence, knowing that no words could truly capture the emotions of farewell. The wrestling world moved fast, and as she walked away, new stars were already rising, new storylines unfolding, new rivalries taking shape. But Debra had made her mark. Her time in the industry had been filled with unforgettable moments, and though she was stepping away, her legacy would remain. As she took her final steps out of the arena, there was a sense of closure. The bright lights dimmed, the roaring crowd faded into the distance, and for the first time in years, she was no longer a performer, no longer playing a character. She was just Debra, ready to embrace whatever came next. Her farewell wasn't just in her career. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where she would finally have the chance to live for herself, away from the scripted drama, the backstage politics, and the endless cycle of performances. And as she walked into the unknown, she carried with her the memories of a career that had defined her, the lessons she had learned, and the knowledge that no matter where life took her next, she would always be a part of wrestling history. Because in the world of wrestling, legends never truly say goodbye. As Debra stepped away from the wrestling world, the echoes of her career remained. Though she had left the bright lights of the arena behind, her presence was still felt in the memories of fans, in the stories told by those who had worked alongside her, and in the legacy she had built. Her time in the industry had been filled with highs and lows, triumphs and struggles. She had played a vital role in an era that shaped professional wrestling, bringing glamour, drama, and a captivating presence to the screen. Whether she was managing champions, delivering memorable promos, or standing at the center of heated rivalries, she had made an impact that couldn't be erased. But beyond the character, beyond the persona that fans had come to know, was a woman who had navigated an industry that wasn't always kind. She had faced scrutiny, endured personal struggles, and sacrificed more than many would ever know. Yet, she had also inspired countless women who came after her, proving that presence and charisma could be just as powerful as physical dominance in the ring. As time passed, Debra's name continued to be spoken with respect and nostalgia. Her career was revisited in documentaries, her moments replayed by fans who still remembered the magic she brought to the screen. She had been a part of something special, a business that, despite its challenges, had given her a platform to create something unforgettable. Her story, like many in wrestling, was one of resilience, and though her time in the ring had ended, her legacy remained, proving that in the world of professional wrestling, some stars never truly fade.